Well, good evening, everybody. Be welcome to the second public hearing of the Justice Cuba Commission. I want to explain first what the Commission does. First of all, the Commission was created to prosecute, to find out the truth behind the crimes against humanity that have been committed by the Castro regime. We know there have been a lot of crimes have been committed under the Castro regime. But not all those crimes are against humanity. We want to focus on those crimes that are the crimes that can be prosecuted and judged under the international law. Therefore, our work is to gather all the evidence, to interview the witnesses, the victims, and also gather all the proofs, photographs, videos, documents, everything that can prove who is the criminal. But not only the regime, we know the names. We know Fidel, we know Raul. But there are people who killed people who torture people who has been and is right now committing crimes against humanity. This classification, this kind of crimes are suddenly in the 20th century being observed, and it started at the end of the Second World War, when all those crimes were not in any code, were not available to prosecute. And it started with the Nuremberg tribunals, and right now we have been in some of other tribunals like the Rwanda, the former Yugoslavia, and some others like Cambodia that are prosecuting those criminals who made those acts against humanity. The commission was created this year, 2017, and it's created by 10 members that we come from 10 different countries other than Cuba. We are not Cubans. To have some distance, emotional distance to these crimes, we have gathered a large group of professionals in democracy, in human rights, and I'm firmly believers in justice. So we have members present here. I'd like to introduce the members of the commission that are present here. We have here Manuel Salva from Spain, lawyer. Hipólito Ramírez from República Dominicana, who is an activist in human rights and has been with the struggle against the regime of Castro for several years. Here on my left is Martín Paz, who was a council member of his hometown in San Cristobal, Venezuela, and now is exiled in Mexico, and he's been fighting for democracy. In Venezuela, that is the country that has been suffering the Castro regime right now. The other members come from different countries, come from Syria, Dr. Maher Nana, from China, Dr. Jiang Lijiang, from Italy, Ana Maria Cervone, from Costa Rica, Milagros Méndez, from Peru, Jorge Villena, and from Uruguay, Martín Elgue. We all are working in the integration of these files, gather all the evidence, the names, the circumstances, everything that a judge may need to initiate the trial against these people who is right now committing crimes. The circumstances right now are that, for example, we were waiting here, Antunes. Antunes should be here and present his case against Castro in this commission. Antunes was forbidden to travel, and Antunes is right now in Cuba, but we know that first, two things we know from this decision. First, we are doing something right. The regime is blocking our work, so we're in the right direction. Second, it's a proof that right now in this moment, in this very moment, they are violating human rights of the people of Cuba. It's only an evidence, and it happens every Sunday with Damas de Blanco. It happens every second. Right now, it's not a thing from the past. We are not trying to judge things that have happened decades ago. It also worries us very much what has happened the last 6 decades. But right now, those people are still alive, still violating human rights, and they have to be recorded, and of course they have to get their files of all the violations with their names, with their circumstances, with the proofs, and in a future, I hope not too far future, they can be judged, and they have in a court, in a special court, judged by their crimes and sentenced. And it's a shame that some of these criminals have died, like Fidel Castro, in his bed. I think they should at least have prison for their crimes. It's an honor to welcome you to this second hearing, public hearing of the International Commission for the Prosecution of Crimes Against Humanity of the Castro regime. I know it's a long name, but it describes what we do. We try to prosecute all those crimes against humanity. I want to thank, first of all of you for being here, but especially Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart, who did all the work to get us here and gather us here in this building that belongs to the legislative power of United States. Also, I want to thank our co-sponsor of this event is Freedom House. I saw people from Freedom House. I saw Judy Perez. Okay. Well, we're very thankful also to Freedom House. Kevin Walsh, thank you for being here. Mario y Miriam de la Peña, thank you for being here and to present your case. La Asociación de Presos Políticos de Tampa, ¿dónde están? ¿Por dónde están? Ahí están. También a la Unión de Expresos Políticos de New Jersey, que me parece que trae una delegación seria y fuerte. Bienvenidos, hicimos lo posible por acercarnos a ustedes. To the Foundation Victims of Communism. Por supuesto, Antonio Rodiles, lo vi por acá hace poco, pero one of the most important political leaders in Cuba. And all of you, without you, it wouldn't be possible. And of course, the most important presence is not the one of the members of the commission. The most important is the witnesses that are coming here to present their cases, to present the evidence of how the regime in Cuba has violated their human rights, how and who has violated those human rights. It's very important to hear so we can start to gather that evidence that lead to a trial and to lead to a sentence eventually in a court of justice. Right now, we like to start the hearings, and I invite the first witness. I'd like to invite Mario and Miriam de la Peña. Please, if you would like to step here, be welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, members of the Commission, for your work and your efforts in seeking justice. On February 24th, 1996, one more crime against humanity was committed by the Cuban state against 4 innocent young men. Their right to life of victims, Armando Alejandre Jr., Carlos Costa, Pablo Morales, and Mario de la Peña, was blatantly violated. We stand here today as Mario's parents, holding the Cuban state responsible for the right to justice for the families, which to this day is being violated. Grief and pain will never leave us. and we have somehow managed to learn to live with it. However, it is the reality of the present, living in a world where the criminals have enjoyed impunity for the past 21 years, that makes us live with open wounds that will not heal until justice prevails. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
You have a strength?
Yeah. It is not that there is lack of evidence. Can you hear me better? Mhm. For many in the international community condemned this crime from the very beginning. The United Nations Security Council, the European Union, the International Civil Aviation Organization, to name a few. In a civil lawsuit filed by 3 of the families of the American victims, a senior U.S. District Judge, James Lawrence King, wrote as he was recounting the crime. And I'm reading from his final judgment to the lawsuit, which we won. He stated, "The government of Cuba on February 24, 1996, in outrageous contempt for international law and basic human rights, murdered 4 human beings in international airspace over the Florida Straits. The victims were brothers to the rescue pilots, flying 2 civilian unarmed planes on a routine humanitarian mission, searching for rafters in the waters between Cuba and the Florida Keys. As the civilian planes flew over international waters, a Russian-built MiG-29 of the Cuban Air Force, without warning, reason, or provocation, blasted the defenseless planes out of the sky with sophisticated air-to-air missiles in 2 separate attacks. The pilots and the aircraft disintegrated in the mid-air explosion following the impact of the missiles. The destruction was so complete that the 4 bodies were never recovered." Judge King proceeds to describe the shootdown. "The missiles disintegrated the brothers to the rescue planes, killing their occupants instantly and leaving almost no recoverable debris. Only a large oil slick marked the spot where the planes went down. The Cuban Air Force never notified or warned the civilian planes, never attempted other methods of interception, and never gave them the opportunity to land. The MiG's first and only response was the intentional and malicious destruction of the brothers to the rescue planes and their 4 innocent occupants. Such behavior violated clearly established international norms requiring the exhaustion of all measures before resort to aggression against any aircraft and banning the use of force against civil aircraft altogether."
So said. So said the judge.
So said the judge. ICAO's report of June 1996 included that the planes were shot down over international waters. In its resolution, ICAO reaffirms the prohibition of the use of weapons against civil aircraft in flight and declared such practices incompatible with elementary considerations of humanity. As a result of the shootdown, the U.S. Congress enacted the Cuban Liberty and Democratic Solidarity Act of 1996, in which Congress defines the shootdown as wholly disproportionate. It reads, "The response chosen by Fidel Castro, the use of lethal force, was completely inappropriate for the situation presented to the Cuban government, making such actions a blatant and barbaric violation of international law and tantamount to cold-blooded murder. Congress went further and strongly condemned the shooting down of the brothers to the rescue aircraft as an act of terrorism by the Castro regime. We have reports from everywhere. The OAS.
No, I just want to say something in regards to the Cuban Liberty and Solidarity Act. And for that act is one of the reasons why the embargo against the regime of Castro, against Cuba, cannot be lifted right now. It's very important for that you know this. And the Castro government is lobbying quite a bit in Washington, D.C. for the lifting of the embargo. But it cannot be lifted because of this law, the law that was enacted back in 1996. And that is one of the reasons that the law does not prohibit, that the law prohibits the lifting of the embargo until there's democracy and freedom in Cuba. And it was done as a punishment for this act of terrorism, of a state-sponsored terrorism. I just wanted to insert that and establish that.
So we have a report from the OAS, the Organization of American States, that did a very thorough report on the shootdown and the violation of the rights to life of Armando, Pablo, Carlos, and Mario is also well documented there. I read from their document, from their findings. Given the circumstances surrounding, this is the OAS report, surrounding the facts which took place February 24th, 1996, the disproportionate and indiscriminate size of use of lethal force which was employed against a small civil aircraft, and the manner in which the authorities of the Havana Military Control Tower congratulated the pilots of the MiG-29 after they carried out their order, the Commission finds sufficient evidence that Carlos Costa, Pablo Morales, Mario de la Peña, and Armando Alejandro Jr. were the subjects of an arbitrary and extrajudicial execution at the hands of agents of the Cuban state. Consequently, the Cuban state is responsible for violating the right to life as enshrined in Article 1 of the American Declaration of the Rights and Duties of Men. The Commission proceeds to defend the rights to justice for the families of Armando, Carlos, Pablo, and Mario. It concluded that the Cuban state is responsible for the violation of the right of justice, Article 18 of the American Declaration of the Rights and Duties of Man, to the detriment of the families of Carlos Costa, Pablo Morales, Mario de la Pena, and Armando Alejandro Jr., whereas the Cuban authorities to date have not conducted an exhaustive investigation in order to prosecute and penalize criminally the parties responsible. On the matter of impunity, which hurts us all, the Commission cites Theo Van Boven, Special Rapporteur of the Subcommission for the Prevention of Discrimination and Protection of Minorities of the Human Rights Commission of the United Nations, who analyzed the question of impunity. Thus, persons who commit violations of human rights, whether they be civil or military, become more audacious if they are not held accountable before the courts. In a social and political atmosphere in which impunity prevails, it is likely that the right to reparation of the victims of flagrant violations of human rights and basic freedoms would be a mere illusion. It is difficult to imagine that a judiciary system which protects the rights of victims can at the same time remain indifferent or inactive in the face of the flagrant offenses of those who have violated them. In closing, We stand here and hopeful that out there does exist a judicial system which, requoting Theo Van Vogen, is a system longing to protect the rights of victims, a system that is not indifferent or inactive in the face of flagrant offenses of those who have violated them. Thank you.
Now we will continue with the same massacre of Hermanos al Rescate, and we have a witness of this massacre who fortunately survived. I want to welcome Silvia Iriondo. She's also dirigent of Mar por Cuba and one of the most important leaders in the Cuban exile.
Thank you,
Thank
René.
you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am president of Mar por Cuba, as René just told you. I was aboard the only plane that made it back home on that fateful day of February 24th, 1996. I thank Justice Cuba and all of you for giving me this opportunity to have my testimony heard in this hearing. For some time, our organization had been helping Brothers to the Rescue in providing humanitarian support and basic supplies to Cuban refugees. Men, women, and children were often intercepted in Bahamian waters while attempting to flee the island prison in search for freedom. The refugees were held at the Carmichael Detention Center in Nassau, Bahamas. Their needs were great and their situation desperate. Volunteer members of our group would take turns accompanying Brothers to the Rescue on their weekly humanitarian relief missions. Saturday, the 24th of February, 1996, was supposed to be no different from any other previous Saturdays for Brothers to the Rescue. Due to circumstances beyond our control, we were informed on Friday by Brothers to the Rescue that the flight had been canceled. The reason being that permission to visit the detention center had been denied by the Bahamian authorities because a delegation of the Castro regime would be there. Members of MAR scheduled to fly on Saturday's mission with Brothers to the Rescue were promptly notified of the cancellation. That same Friday night, numerous exiled political organizations were meeting at the Hyatt Hotel in Coral Gables in support of Concilio Cubano, a coalition of more than 130 active civic opposition groups within the island that had requested permission to convene on February 24th to exercise their fundamental rights to free assembly and freedom of expression. The Castro regime answered their petition by unleashing a violent wave of repression that resulted in the incarceration of many pro-democracy and human rights activists. Our role at the Hyatt that night was to raise our voices, to denounce these violations, and to expose the totalitarian nature of the dictatorship in solidarity with the courageous Cuban resistance in the island. It was at the Hyatt Friday night that Brothers to the Rescue agreed to conduct a search and rescue humanitarian flight in the Straits of Florida on Saturday, February 24th, 1996. There had been a few sightings of rafters recently in the Straits, and the date of February 24th was very important to the Cuban people since it commemorates Cuba's struggle for independence from Spain in 1895, as well as being the date chosen by Concilio Cubano to come together in the group's unrelenting efforts to bring about democratic change to the island under totalitarian rule and oppression. Armando Alejandre Jr., my husband Andres, and I volunteered to go along as spotters on that flight. It could have been any of the many other volunteers who through the years had accompanied Brothers to the Rescue on some 2,000 humanitarian search and rescue flights, which helped save more than 5,000 lives of Cuban men, women, and children. So it was that the three of us joined Basulto, Arnaldo Iglesias, Carlos Costa, Mario Manuel de la Peña, and Pablo Morales, pilots and members of Brothers to the Rescue, on that February 24th, 1996 flight. The three small planes took off from Brothers to the Rescue hangar in Opaloca, one after the other, between the hours of 1:15 and 1:30 in the afternoon. It was my first search and rescue flight. I was exhilarated at the opportunity to help save a life and concentrated on looking at that vast ocean, hoping to spot that tiny speck in the water that could signal a fragile raft full of Cubans in dire need of assistance. I was also seeing from afar in the horizon the silhouettes of what had once been the familiar skyline of my life. The day was beautiful, the sea was transparently blue and calm, there were not many clouds in the sky, and the sun shone brightly. Our three planes were in constant communication with each other. We could also hear other traffic in the area through our earphones or transponders. All of a sudden, and without warning, we saw a very fast object passing us by. Then another. We saw what seemed like a flare and a thin line of smoke. I recall hearing Basulto say, "They're gonna shoot at us." And I remember asking him incredulously, "Are they going to shoot at us?" Like saying, "You've got to be kidding." Cuban MiGs had been dispatched. We immediately lost communication with the plane piloted by Carlos Costa with Pablo Morales on board. Over and over again, Mario Manuel de la Peña and Basulto, pilots of the two other planes, tried to establish contact with Carlos to no avail. It was 3:21 in the afternoon. Then we saw a second stream of smoke, this time wider, and we saw what seemed like flames. It was 3:27 in the afternoon. We then lost communication with the plane piloted by Mario Manuel de la Peña, with Armando Alejandre Jr. on board. In spite of many attempts to reach Mario Manuel, there was no response. I held my husband's hand as I took out my rosary and started praying. In what must have been seconds or minutes, my life unfolded before me. I said goodbye to my mother, to my children, to my family, to my loved ones. The silence was deafening. I remember thinking that maybe it was the silence of death and that we were probably already dead and we didn't know it. Later, I would find out that the silence was because the transponders were shut off. It all happened so very fast. As the minutes went by in what seemed like an eternity, and while heading north, Basulto radioed our control tower and declared an emergency. In spite of our worst fears, we kept hoping to hear their voices again at any moment. At first, we were instructed to proceed to Key West. When we were about to follow their instructions, Basulto informed the tower that we were heading straight to our base in Opaloca, where the families and Brothers to the Rescue members would be awaiting. Days later, we were able to hear the tapes at the FBI headquarters of the Justice Department's building in Miami. We heard the Cuban MiGs pilots gloating in their communications with Cuba's control tower, their cowardly voices of contempt and jubilation as they fired air-to-air missiles and cheered the downing of small, civil, unarmed, and defenseless planes with total disregard for human lives still ring in my ears. It was through those recordings that we first realized that a second set of MiGs had been dispatched to hunt and shoot our plane down as well. The recordings document when Cuba's control tower instructs its pilots to visually identify our plane. Once visual contact is made, and the third BTTR plane is identified as a light blue Cessna, there is a prolonged silence followed by a voice from Cuba's control tower that orders the MiGs to abort the mission. By this time, the MiGs were just 3 minutes away from U.S. shores. As history tells us, only one of the 3 planes returned to base on February 24, 1996, with 4 of us on board as unlikely witnesses to a horrendous crime committed with premeditation, in cold blood, and in broad daylight. The Castros, Fidel and Raúl, had ordered the brutal shootdown, which they later publicly admitted. Fidel and Raúl Castro were directly responsible for the murders in international airspace of 3 American citizens and 1 legal United States resident, whose only purpose was to aid those in need and rescue those in peril. On that fateful day, before the eyes of the world, the criminal nature of the Castro regime, its complete disregard for standard procedures, norms, and international laws, its contempt for the Cuban people and for human life, as well as its brutal repressive apparatus, became evident one more time. Carlos Costa, Armando Alejandre Jr., Mario Manuel de la Peña, and Pablo Morales were young men full of dreams and ideals who represented the very best of their generations. Their lives were taken while they tried to save the lives of others in what constitutes one of humanity's most noble deeds. They had loving families that mourn them in sorrow and still wait for justice to be done. Carlos, Armando, Mario Manuel, and Pablo were murdered the 24th of February 1996. The culprits, Fidel and Raúl Castro, are well known. To this day, this heinous crime against humanity remains unpunished with total impunity. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a question that begs an unequivocal answer. What more does it take to bring justice and call these murderers by their names? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. It's very important that we know what really happened. We have a lot of evidence. We have the names of the pilots. We have the line of command that goes straight to Raúl and Fidel Castro. We know who is to blame for these killings. We are going to find a way to bring them to the justice. Now, in this second block, we're going to receive the testimony of massacres that have been committed by the Castro regime. And I'd like to invite here Jorge Garcia Mas. Jorge is going to talk about the massacre of the result of the sinking of the 13 de Marzo tugboat that was sunk by the regime forces, and Jorge, in the terrible occasion, lost 14 members of his family. Gracias, Jorge, por estar con nosotros de nuevo.
Muchas gracias a ustedes. Ajá.
¿Me puedes dar una pausa de vez en cuando para...?
Claro, tú sabes. Me disculpan, yo voy a hablar en español
Excuse me, I'm going...
por respeto al idioma inglés, porque mi inglés es muy malo.
Excuse me, I'm going to be speaking in Spanish out of respect for the English language because my English is terrible.
Señor presidente, demás miembros de la comisión, personalidades aquí presentes, prensa acreditada, amigos y hermanos.
Mr. President, other members of the Commission, guests, members of the media,
Mi calvario ya cumple 23 años desde que fue hundido el remolcador 13 de marzo, el 13 de julio de 1994.
My cavalry has been going on for 23 years since the sinking of the 13 de Marzo tugboat in the early morning hours of July 13th, 1994.
Precisamente, mi hijo Joel, una de las 37 víctimas de este crimen, ayer cumplió 43 años de edad. Ayer precisamente que yo venía saliendo para acá, para Estados Unidos, a participar de este foro.
My son Joel, one of the 37 victims of this crime, yesterday turned 43 years old, 20 years having lived on this earth and 23 years in heaven.
Las condenas de genocidio recibidas por el régimen de Cuba en diferentes foros internacionales a lo largo de 4 lustros y pico han sido inútiles.
The condemnations of genocide that the regime in Cuba has received in different international forums over these years have been useless.
Los asesinos que mataron a mi familia y a la familia y a tantas familias cubanas en este crimen siguen ocupando puestos importantes dentro de la jerarquía cubana y tristemente caminan indemnes por las calles de Cuba.
The murderers that killed my family members and also many other Cuban families remain in the Cuban hierarchy and are walking freely in the streets of Cuba.
Sin embargo, aunque mi edad llega al ocaso, conservo la esperanza de ver en el banquillo de los acusados a todos estos que mataron los sueños de tantas personas inocentes e impidieron el normal desarrollo y el derecho a ser hombres y mujeres de bien a los 10 niñitos incluidos en la lista fatídica. Aquí están los 10 niñitos.
Nevertheless, although I'm getting long in years, I still have the hope to see in the bank of the accused those who in one matter, by one mean or another, were responsible for the murder of the dreams of such a large group of persons, of innocent persons, who were not allowed the normal development of life, and the right of these men and women and more than 10 children included in this fatal list.
Asesinos, sí, asesinos, porque no sé, no encuentro palabras ninguna, aunque yo pueda describir a estos pordioseros de alma, no puedo llamarle de otra manera, y que dicen representar un régimen que defiende a la mujer y a la niñez. Mentira. Asesinos.
Murderers, yes, murderers. Because I can't find another word to define them. These rotting souls that say to represent a government that claims to defend women and children. Murderers.
Los gendarmes de poder en Cuba se apresuraron a cubrir bajo el manto de la impunidad a todos estos malhechores y con los ingredientes de la argucia fabricaron un caso donde, entre otras cosas, las culpas eran de las propias víctimas.
The regime in power in Cuba pressured to cover up this crime with impunity and use the ingredients of fabricating a case in which the victims were the ones held responsible for this crime.
Y las causas del hundimiento, entre otras cosas, ellos argumentaban que era la vejez del remolcador. Alguien dijo por ahí, 115 años de vida. Y yo pregunto, ¿existían remolcadores 115 años atrás? ¿Existían remolcadores en el año 1871? Hasta ahora, la historia de la navegación marítima jamás ha recogido esto como dato.
One of the reasons that they gave for the sinking was the age of the tugboat, and they claimed that the tugboat was 115 years old. Has anyone ever heard of a tugboat that was manufactured in 1871?
Si estas fueran las causas del hundimiento, ¿cómo el Granma salió de Tuxpan, Las Coloradas, hasta Las Coloradas en Cuba, navegó 6 días por 2 mares, llevaba arriba 82 hombres, armas, tanques de agua y de combustible de reserva, y llegaron a Las Coloradas sin problemas? Incluso los cogió una tormenta en el camino. El remolcador 13 de marzo solamente navegó 7 millas al norte de La Habana.
Let us contrast this with another, Granma, that left Tuxpan in Mexico with 82 men on board, weapons, water, gas in reserve, and they were able to navigate for 7 days, cross 2 seas. They were caught under a storm, but they still arrived safe and sound to Las Coloradas in the southern part of eastern Cuba. Nevertheless, the 13 de Marzo tugboat was not able to get beyond the 7 miles to the north of the Morro in Havana.
Bajo el fuego, y voy a hacer esta aclaración, de los proyectiles de agua lanzados por potentes cañones, no mangueras. La manguera es noble, se puede aguantar y echar un chorrito. Son cañones de agua a una presión, oigan esta barbaridad, de 232 libras por pulgada cuadrada. ¿Acaso eso no es un crimen? Un chorro de agua que tumba una pared y lanzarlo sobre los cuerpos de las personas que iban en cubierta. ¿Acaso eso no es un crimen?
Under the fire of high-pressure water projectiles expelled from water cannons with a pressure of 232 pounds per square inch, something that could knock down a wall, water that would never slow down. Is that not a crime? Is that not a crime to use that against human beings?
Y era agua que no se acababa nunca. 30 metros cúbicos por hora, sacado de las profundidades del mar, lanzado por 6 cañones. 6 cañones, eran 3 embarcaciones y cada una tenía 2 cañones de agua encima. Por ahí están las fotos.
So they were the water pressure, 30 cubic meters per hour from 6 cannons from 3 boats that had surrounded the tugboat.
Ahora, no les bastó eso. No les bastó los chorros de agua. ¿Qué hicieron? Trataron de hundir la embarcación a bandazo limpio, a golpe limpio, sobre el casco del 13 de marzo. ¿Y quiénes daban los golpes? Las 3 embarcaciones por largo, el 2, el 3 y el 5, arremetían contra el casco del 13 de marzo. ¿Ustedes saben cuánto pesa cada embarcación de esas? 93 toneladas. ¿Ustedes saben cuánto significa 93 toneladas de impulso sobre una embarcación indefensa? ¿Qué abuso? ¿Cómo puedo calificar esto si no es un abuso?
So, not failing with the water pressure, they decided to smash into with the 3 other tugboats, Por Largo 2, Por Largo 3, Por Largo 5, against the 13 de Marzo. And we're talking 93 tons per ship. Imagine those 93 tons directed with acceleration into the 13 de Marzo. There's only one way to qualify this, as an abuse.
Quiero darle algunos datos de interés para que se comprenda lo que digo aquí. No lo digo por impulso, aunque me vean así agitado. Lo digo con mi corazón, porque aquí no hay odio, se lo digo. Aquí mi corazón está lleno de amor. Y si yo hablo fuerte aquí es para que se comprenda la naturaleza de este crimen. Les voy a dar algunos datos. El remolcador 13 de marzo tiene 18 metros de eslora. El yate Granma tiene 13 metros. El remolcador 13 de marzo posee un motor de 500 caballos. El Granma tiene un motor de 225 caballos. El 13 de marzo está registrado en el registro cubano de buques como una embarcación de trabajo. El yate Granma es una embarcación de paseo. Pregunto, ¿cómo llegó el Granma a las Coloradas? Y el 13 de marzo no pudo navegar apenas 7 millas al norte del Morro.
I'm speaking with great force, but not out of hatred, but with my heart, so you can understand and hear what I'm saying. And I want to touch on some specific statistics that might be of interest that give evidence to the truth. The 13 de Marzo tugboat was 18 meters in length. The Granma yacht, just 13. The 13 de Marzo tugboat had a motor of 500 horses versus the Granma yacht of just 225. The 13 de Marzo tugboat is listed in the registry of Cuban ships as an embarkation of working class, whereas the Granma yacht is classified as a luxury cruiser.
Nunca nos entregaron los muertos. Hoy por hoy yo conservo la imagen viva de mi hijo cuando se despidió de mí, de mi nieto Juan Mario, que hizo una varita de pescar con una rama de un árbol y me dijo: papá, te voy a traer un pescado bien grande para que te lo comas. Y me mira diciéndome como que quería que yo le dijera lo que siempre le dije: tú siempre tan amable, mi nieto. Y él me dijo: tú siempre tan amable. Es verdad que los niños iban engañados. No hace falta decirle a lo que iban. Ahora bien, ni nos entregaron los muertos, ni tampoco reflotaron la embarcación del fondo de la bahía. O sea, que hoy por hoy, allá abajo está el remolcador 13 de marzo y lo que pueda quedar de las personas que murieron ahogadas.
My son died here. My grandson, Juan Mario, who told me he was going to get me a big fish, and expected me to respond with, "You always so friendly." The children didn't know where they were going because we didn't have to put that kind of pressure on them. But I think it's important to know that they never turned over the bodies to us. They never rescued or refloated the 13 de Marzo tugboat. They're still there, along with what remains of our family members.
Ahora, ¿qué es lo que precisa un grupo de personas que ha sufrido en esa madrugada, muchos sin saber nadar, ha sufrido la embestida de estos bárbaros? ¿Qué es lo que necesitan cuando aquel que se pudo salvar, qué es lo que precisa? Una terapia psicológica que los lleve a la normalidad. Ahora, ¿ustedes saben cuál fue el regalito? Vivir entre barrotes. Ese fue el regalito. a unos y a otros, beber a sorbos un veneno dentro de una taza de café. Eso se lo hicieron a mi hija. Para que no quede duda, se lo hicieron a mi hija.
So what do you think the response should be to those who have suffered, the survivors, family members of this atrocity? Therapy to help them get better, wouldn't you? Well, some placed behind bars, others under surveillance, others poison placed in their coffee. That's something that happened to my daughter.
Yo quiero pedirle aquí a los miembros de esta comisión poner a buen recaudo a todos estos malhechores. No para venganza, porque a mí nadie me va a devolver nunca, ningún veredicto me va a devolver nunca la felicidad que yo tuve con ellos en mi casa. Eso nada me lo devolverá. Pero lo que quiero es que la justicia dé una buena lección para que estos hechos no se repitan nunca más en Cuba ni en ninguna parte del mundo. Por eso yo estoy aquí, he estado en varios foros para hacer este tipo de denuncia.
I'm not here out of vengeance, and I can never get my family members back. What I'm here is to make sure that this type of crime is never repeated again. That is why I'm coming to these forums and giving this testimony.
Y mientras Dios y mis muertos patrocinan este calvario mío y me inyectan fuerzas para impedir que mis piernas se dobleguen. Y ya hoy me tuvieron que ayudar mucho los miembros porque ya las rodillas no me dan. Los culpables, sí, esos mismos, que fueron muy valientes en ese momento a acabar con las vidas de esos niños. Esos culpables, tan temblorosos por el veredicto de los hombres de ley. Yo voy tranquilo, señores, con mis despojos a cuestas. Y cada vez que miro el barrio de Dios, veo las nuevas luces que hay allí desde julio del año 94. Muchas gracias.
Just to conclude, and while God and my dead guide me on this path, injecting me with strength, even though my legs buckle, the guilty are still nervous because of the verdict of men of law. Therefore, I'm very calm wherever I am on this earth. But I do keep my eyes front and looking at the neighborhood of God, and with pride to the new lights that show since July 13th, 1994. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, hermano. Gracias. Muchas gracias a ustedes. Gracias, presidente.
I'd like to thank very much the testimony of Jorge and also the translation. It's available by John Suarez, the Center for a Free Cuba, and of course Frank Calzón is with us. And I think I saw a congressman over there. Huh? Congressman Curvelo. He's on an interview. So we're going to proceed. Right now, I want to introduce the testimony of Aldo Chaviano. Aldo Chaviano is the first time he's going to speak publicly about what happened in an illegal, absolutely massacre of 21 persons as a result of their being captured in the uprising of Escambray. Aldo, por favor. ¿Quieres que traduzcamos al inglés?
Mejor.
cuestión,
Ok,
por cualquier cosa, para que
ok.
no hay micrófono, entonces se van a distraer.
No, no,
La
no,
voz.
no hay problema. Bueno, quiero explicarles lo esencial de este juicio. En 1961 fuimos capturados casi todos en combates en el Escambray, excepto 4 personas que no eran alzados, que eran campesinos que le daban comida a los alzados y también los enrolaron y los fusilaron ahí. Había algunos presos desde el 60, pero la mayoría de a principios del 61. Fuimos capturados y llevados a Collantes, un sanatorio de tuberculosos que lo usaron para centro de interrogación y prisión.
I want to give some of the essential facts of this trial in 1961, where a group of us were captured, but an additional 4 who were just peasants who'd been providing us with assistance were also executed. There were also some other prisoners from 1960 we were taking to a center that had been for victims of tuberculosis and been converted into a prison.
En Collantes, allí fue un centro de interrogación y en esa época era con no muchas técnicas, bastantes golpes, y usaron todo lo que tenían porque era un centro de operaciones y no podía ir ningún público.
In Collantes, in this interrogation center, there were many beatings. There wasn't a lot of technical innovation, but it was a center where there was no access by the public.
En Collantes se nos dio una petición fiscal de pena de muerte. Cuando llevábamos 4 o 5 meses allí, se nos traslada a Isle Pino, un reclusorio donde estaban ya la gente condenada. Era una petición fiscal para 24 personas. En 1963 llaman a 23 y al 24 le dijeron, te quedas y te salvaste. Sí.
The prosecution requested the death penalty for 24 of us.
Yeah.
For 4 or 5 months, we were taken to Pinar del Rio in a night.
No.
Perdón?
Isle Pino.
Isla de Pinos, perdón. We were taken to Isle of Pines, and in 1963, 23 were called to be executed, and 1 was told, you're going to live.
Yeah. We came to en español.
Oye, mejor.
Voy a probar un poquito. We arrived to at the airport of Santa Clara. They take to the Services Intelligence Prison, the NMG2. They put us in different small cells, bring different papers to everyone, to the first paper. They maybe 15 days more or less, they called 2 persons, Macario Quintena y Aquilino Cerquera. These 2 persons, they took to Trinidad, a town close where the Alzados was closed, and announced that they go to kill these people over there. They take a place named Las Tinajas and make like a trial, but not just only people dressing in green, and that's it. They killed the two over there. Next day, they took us. They took us to a place close to Manacaisnaga. They named the old factory of sugar in Snaga. The house of a doctor that was the owner was a campament of soldiers. The only in this place was soldier. The any person that was not soldier over there was some people they bring to accuse us. In this day, first thing, they show the two person killed. In order, we say, well, we go to. And begin the trial maybe 12 hours. But no lawyer, we never saw a lawyer for us. The president of the trial was a Capitan named bueno, nosotros we name el Pinto Aveledo y the fiscal was the mayor Humberto Jorges. They accuse us of several things that we don't do, but you couldn't speak nothing. You are typing in the back, one person in every side holding you, and that's it. We pass maybe 12 hours over there. Stop one time to give a water you, very water. And after that, they said that they are condemned to death. They go to drink coffee inside the house, come back, and they said the appeal was done. They condemned 19 to death to 30 years in prison. They prepare, before we live there, the people that go to kill these people, who go to be the group that go to shot. They separate over there, and they take us in different car. They took truck. This was in the mountain. In one row, where the road make a curve, they put the truck with the line in that way, and they prepare for kill the people over there. When they shoot the first 3 or 4, the people begin to set down to the communists, and what they do, put all the group together and kill everybody. In this group, only one stand up, and they shot until they fall down. This is what they do the 13th of July, 1963. In this group was a lot of people, but first was what named campesinos in Cuba. That is the farmer that maybe help you to give them the water or give you food. They put in a group and kill 4 people of this, in this group. In the prison, the other person that was survivor over there, death in prison because was a little old one, it was so many years. The only survivor was me, but I passed 26 years, 4 months in prison. Thank you.
And right now, I'd like to invite here Ernesto Diaz. He's going to talk about torture in prison. And we're going to start with a subject that it's right now being very public, is the torture by sonic means. No? The torture that the diplomatics in Havana, U.S. diplomatics have been suffered. They trained with political prisoners, and Ernesto is going to tell us something about it.
That's okay. Buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon, all.
Una razón de suma importancia motiva nuestra presencia aquí en la tarde de hoy ante la Comisión Internacional para la Fiscalización de los Crímenes de Lesa Humanidad del castrismo.
A reason of great importance that motivates my presence here today before this International Commission for the Fiscalization of the Crimes of Humanity of the Castro regime.
Gracias a los representantes de Justicia Cuba por la oportunidad que nos ofrece de prestar testimonios como víctimas de la tiranía comunista de Cuba.
Thank you to the representatives of Justice Cuba for the opportunity presented to give testimony to the victims of the communist tyranny of Cuba.
Gracias a cada uno de los presentes, porque en ellos reverdece cada día el árbol de la más frondosa libertad. La libertad sin manchas, esa que nos concede Dios y que en ocasiones nos es arrebatada por figuras diabólicas, enfermas de poder y de gloria.
Thank you to each one of you present, because you are helping to refresh the tree of liberty, the liberty without stains that is given to us by God, but that on occasion is taken from us by diabolic figures, sick with power and glory.
La libertad que un día se nos esfumó entre los dedos y se nos convirtió en cárceles y campos de concentración y en náufragos a la deriva en aguas de un océano borrascoso.
The freedom that one day just fell through our hands, through our fingers of our hands, and was turned into prisons, concentration camps, and losses on the high seas and dark oceans.
Por el renacimiento de esa libertad perdida, durante muchos años los cubanos hemos luchado y hemos sufrido encierro, atropellos y torturas.
For the rebirth of liberty, lost for so many years by Cubans who have struggled and are suffering imprisonment, abuses, and tortures.
Miles de jóvenes, radiantes de ese hermoso idealismo que hace grande a los pueblos, han sido asesinados en los paredones de fusilamiento.
Thousands of youth, radiant with their idealism that makes a people great, have been murdered before the firing squads.
Son víctimas heroicas que, aunque ya no laten sus arterias, son vivos testimonios su acallada voz y su sangre deshecha.
These heroic victims that although their arteries are no longer beating, their hearts are no longer beating, they live on in their testimonies, in their silenced voice, in the blood that was lost.
Están ellos presentes aquí en simbólico gesto acusatorio contra los crímenes de lesa humanidad que el régimen de Cuba ha venido cometiendo a través de los años.
They are here present in a symbolic accusation against these crimes against humanity that the regime of Cuba has been committing all these years.
Para que este estado de agonía nacional trascienda e ilumine la estrella de la paz, nuestro cielo cautivo, pedimos solidaridad.
Because of this state of national agony, transcendent national agony, we illuminate the star of peace in our heaven, in our captured heaven, and we ask for solidarity.
La solidaridad con los pueblos oprimidos no es una limosna que se pide, ni dádiva de comprensión que se concede.
The solidarity with the oppressed peoples is not something to be begged or something that's just passed off or a comprehension that's just conceded.
Es una obligación universal, una obligación moral de la conciencia y del espíritu.
It is a universal obligation, a moral obligation of the conscience of the spirit.
De la misma forma que es una obligación de un alma generosa dar un pedazo de pan al hambriento o regalar una sonrisa de amor a un enfermo o a un niño.
In the same way that it is an obligation for a generous soul to give a piece of bread to someone who's hungry, or to give a gift of a smile, of love, of someone who is sick, or to a child.
Pero no hemos venido a este trascendental evento a censurar la indiferencia de otros ante la tragedia cubana.
But we have not come here to this transcendental event to censor the indifference of others before the Cuban tragedy.
Hemos venido a denunciar con vehemencia las torturas que a través de los años han estado aplicando contra personas indefensas los verdugos de la tiranía comunista de Cuba.
We have come here to denounce with vehemence the tortures that throughout these years they have been applying against defenseless peoples, the thugs of the Castro communist tyranny of Cuba.
Son delitos de odio, son crímenes de lesa humanidad de los que interesa conocer a esta comisión internacional que nos ha convocado para prestar testimonios.
These are crimes of hate. They are crimes against humanity that are of interest to be known to this international commission that has called us here to give our testimony.
En días pasados, el mundo ha podido conocer la inhumana aplicación de avanzados sistemas de desestabilización física y mental que funcionarios del cuerpo diplomático de los Estados Unidos han sufrido en Cuba.
In recent days, the world has been able to learn the inhuman application of advanced systems of physical destabilization and mental destabilization by against functionaries of the diplomatic body of the United States suffered in Cuba.
De acuerdo a las informaciones del gobierno de este país, el régimen comunista ha venido negando su responsabilidad en los hechos de suma gravedad que significan estos atentados sónicos, no solo contra los diplomáticos norteamericanos acreditados en La Habana, sino también contra sus familiares, incluyendo niños.
According to government reports of this country, the communist regime has been denying its responsibility in these acts, these grave acts that signify sonic attacks, not only against the diplomats, the North American diplomats accredited in Havana, but also against their family members, including their children.
Aunque con otras características, en el verano de 1977, en ocasión de encontrarnos varios prisioneros políticos cubanos confinados a los calabozos de castigo en la cárcel Combinado del Este, las autoridades carcelarias hicieron uso de la aplicación de torturas acústicas con la intención de quebrantar nuestro estado de salud físico y mental.
Although with other characteristics, in the summer of 1977, in an occasion of various political prisoners finding themselves confined to the cells, the punishment cells of the prison of Combinado del Este, the authorities of the prison applied sonic tortures with the intention of breaking our physical and mental state.
En el área de los calabozos de castigo, donde había sido confinado por aquellos días, se encontraban también los exprisioneros políticos cubanos Luis Zúñiga Rey, presente aquí en esta tarde de hoy, que también prestará su testimonio, Miguel Ángel Álvarez Cardentey, Servando Infante Jiménez, Remberto Zamora Chirino, Teodoro González Alvarado, Sergio Bravo y Reinaldo López Limas.
In the area of the prison, of the punishment cells, where they had been confined in those days, also were found the Cuban ex-political prisoners, Luis Zúñiga Rey, who will be testifying later, Miguel Ángel Álvarez Cardentey, Servando Infante Jiménez, Remberto Zamora Chirino, Teodoro González Alvarado, Sergio Bravo, and Reinaldo López Lima.
Rafael del Pino Ciero, ciudadano norteamericano, era otro de los que habitaban aquellos infernales calabozos.
Rafael del Pino Cerro, a North American citizen, was another one who was within those infernal prisons.
Conocíamos de sus discrepancias personales con Fidel Castro, con quien había compartido una frustrada amistad. Fue esta razón el aparente motivo de que en represalia durante varios años le negaran una asistencia médica adecuada para corregirle la seria afección que había sufrido en la vejiga.
We got to know the personal difficulties with Fidel Castro, who he had a frustrated friendship with. And that was the reason, apparently, the motive, that in retaliation for various years, they denied him medical assistance, adequate medical assistance, to correct a serious infection that he had suffered in the
La vejiga, el bladder.
in the bladder.
De esa forma, desde su arresto y confinamiento a prisión, se había visto obligado a cargar por años con una sonda y una bolsa plástica para la recolección de su orina.
And for that reason, since his arrest and confinement in prison, he had been obliged to carry around for years a plastic bag and tube to recollect his urine.
El sufrimiento acumulado durante esa etapa de crueldad, sumado a las torturas sónicas de que junto a nosotros fue víctima, probablemente fueron las causas que por aquellos días motivaron lo que el gobierno definió como un suicidio de este prisionero político en su calabozo de castigo.
The accumulated suffering during this stage, added to with the sonic tortures that he suffered together with us, who together with us was a victim of, probably led to what in those days the regime claimed motivated and defined as a suicide of this political prisoner in that punishment cell.
Aunque fue esta la versión oficial de su aparente ahorcamiento, no ha sido posible esclarecerse el origen ni las causas de esta tragedia, por lo que no se descarta la posibilidad de que la muerte de Rafael del Pino haya sido un asesinato más de la tiranía comunista de Cuba.
Although this was the official version of this apparent strangulation, that has not been cleared up, the origin nor the causes of this tragedy. Therefore, we cannot discard the possibility that the death of Rafael del Pino was yet another murder of the communist tyranny of Cuba.
A este periodo de encarcelamiento nuestro en el Combinado del Este le siguió otro mucho más cruel aún, violador de las normas internacionales de civilización y respeto a la dignidad de la persona humana.
During this period of our imprisonment in the prison Combinado del Este, continued another more cruel violation of international norms of civilization and respect for the dignity of the human person.
El 25 de julio de 1979, un grupo de poco más de un centenar de presos políticos fuimos transferidos a la tristemente célebre cárcel de Boniato, en el extremo oriental de la isla de Cuba.
On the 25th of July, 1979, a group of us, more than 100 political prisoners, were transferred to the sadly celebrated prison of Boniato in the extreme east of the island of Cuba.
El viaje, que duró unas 40 horas, incluyendo una estancia nocturna en la provincia de Camagüey, en la provincia Kilo 7, en la prisión Kilo 7, lo hicimos en hacinamiento total, en jaulas de transporte carcelario, donde apenas teníamos espacio para cambiar de posición o simplemente tener la posibilidad para mover las piernas.
The trip lasted around 40 hours, including a nocturnal stay in the province of Camagüey. In the prison Kilo 7, we were totally exposed in cells of prison transport where we scarcely had enough space to be able to change position or to simply have the possibility to move our legs.
Una vez en la cárcel de Boniato, el régimen no tardó en acudir a una renovada práctica en la aplicación de barbarias y torturas.
Once in the prison of Boniato, the regime did not tardy in going to some of its renovated practices and applications of barbarism and torture.
Durante un periodo de 7 años, en inútil empeño por quebrantar nuestro espíritu de lucha, fuimos sometidos a atropellos psicológicos y físicos. Se nos mantuvo incomunicados en celdas tapiadas de castigo, sin posibilidad de contacto con nuestros familiares.
During a period of 7 years, in a failed attempt to break our spirit of struggle, we were submitted to psychological and physical assaults. We were maintained incommunicado in punishment cells, in sealed cells, punishment cells, without the possibility of contact with our families.
A un mismo tiempo se nos prohibió recibir todo tipo de asistencia médica, sin que se tuviera en cuenta las dolencias y el quebrantado estado de salud de una buena parte de los prisioneros, ya con edad avanzada y largos años de condena cumplidos.
At the same time, we were prohibited from receiving all type of medical assistance without taking into account all the health problems and the exhausted state of health a good part of the prisoners had, and many of them extremely old, along these long years of prison completed.
Vino entonces como método adicional de tortura la aplicación de largas jornadas sometidos a ensordecedores ruidos electrónicos aplicados a través de inmensas bocinas instaladas en el corredor de las celdas.
And then came, as an additional method of torture, the application of long periods of being subjected to electronic sounds that were drowning us out through huge speakers that surrounded our cells.
Esta práctica brutal, dirigida en esta ocasión por el capitán Alvis Matos, quien recientemente había regresado, comentaba con sádico orgullo de un entrenamiento especial en medidas carcelarias que se le impartió en la Unión de Repúblicas Socialistas Soviéticas.
This brutal practice, directed on this occasion by Captain Alvis Matos, who had recently returned, commented with sadistic pride of his special training in jail methods that he learned at the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics.
Esto es solo parte de las represiones sufridas a través de los años por los prisioneros políticos plantados en las cárceles de Cuba.
This is just a part of the repression suffered across the years by these defiant political prisoners in the jails of Cuba.
Esperamos que nuestros testimonios sirvan para valorar la crueldad sistemática puesta en práctica contra quienes luchan por alcanzar en nuestro país un sistema de gobierno verdaderamente justo en sus prácticas y en sus concepciones, emanado de unas elecciones transparentes y pluripartidistas, capaz de transitar hacia el renacimiento de una nación libre, democrática y feliz. Muchas gracias.
We hope dame un chance de terminar la última parte.
No, sí, claro.
We hope that our testimony will serve to measure the systematic cruelty placed in practice against those who were struggling to obtain in our country a system of government that is truly just and whose practices and whose conceptions emanate from transparent, plural party elections and are able to transition to a rebirth of a free nation that is democratic and happy.
Gracias.
Gracias.
The Castro regime in Cuba. On my 19 years in prison in the island, I was a victim and a witness of innumerable cases of torture, cruel and inhumane treatment, mutilations, and killings. Limited by the time frame of this presentation, I will concentrate my testimony on the most outstanding cases where I was a victim and others that I qualify as brutal, perpetrated against other political prisoners. In 1979, in Combinado del Este prison in Havana, a group of prisoners, Ernesto and I were alone on that torture. In Combinado del Este, a group of prisoners who were protesting for the inhumane living conditions were taken to the punishment pavilion, known as the 47, on the backside of a prison. There, we were submitted to ultrasonic tortures. The methodology consisted of placing large loudspeakers around 4 feet high each, like those used at multitudinary events to amplify the audio, at both ends of a hallway of cells. Then, the loudspeakers were connected to some sort of electronic device that produced high-pitched sounds, similar to those issued by a radio tuned to the shortwave band, but not dialed on any specific frequency. Sounds were issued oscillating from very high pitch to ultra high pitch that practically pierced the eardrums. Given the fact that all cells were lined on one side of the building and they had no windows, the echoes seemed to multiply the pitching sounds. As time passed, I felt increasingly uneasy, unable to think, and covering the ears with my hands did not work. I plugged my ears with balls made with threads that I pulled from my underwear, but the piercing was so intense that a beating headache took over unendingly. This torture was kept for days and nights without a respite, and ended when one of the prisoners, Rafael del Pino Ciero, hung himself and died. He died under torture, under this torture. In April 2008, a court found the Cuban regime guilty in absence for the death of Rafael del Pino in Miami. Years later, in 1981, at Boniato Prison in Santiago de Cuba, we were submitted again to the ultrasonic tortures, trying to make us quit our position of plantados. We were called as such for refusing to accept the re-education plan, a communist indoctrination process aimed at making prisoners drop our steadfast anti-communist beliefs. Captain Alvis Matos in charge of the torture, used to boast of his being trained at the Soviet Union. But this time, we replied by hitting the iron boards that covered the prison cells using our boots. In fact, we were defying the noise, and after a couple of days, they stopped the torture. I was also confined to sealed cells, or celdas tapiadas, as we call them, because the cells had the window and door covered by iron plates that turned the cells into dark enclosures. The first time, here I have pictures of sealed cells taken clandestinely in Cuba. The first time I was put into a sealed cell was in the prison of Santa Clara, Las Villas province, for 2 years. The second time in Boniato Prison, Santiago de Cuba province, for 5 years. In 1988, when Mrs. Marion Mushrooms, president of Amnesty International, was allowed to visit Combinado del Este prison in Havana, she walked into a sealed cell and cried in disbelief because she had thought that such cells were fabrications of the enemies of the revolution to damage the human rights image of Cuba. However, Amnesty International kept silent not just about these cells of torture, but also about the many testimonies she received from the political prisoners about mutilations, assassinations, and beatings. United Nations have evidences of sealed cells and of those crimes. I regret that we were unable to locate any of the former political prisoners victims of the massacre of Boniato, occurred on September the 1st, 1975, when the prisoners protested for the denial to provide dental assistance to a prisoner having an abscess in a molar tooth which was draining pus. The answer of the authorities was to open all the cells, simulating they would take the prisoners for an hour of sunlight, and when they were all on the hallway, a group of armed guards came in shooting their semi-automatic guns. Gerardo Gonzalez, an evangelical pastor, died immediately by the shot on the head. Enrique Diaz Correa got four shots on the chest, and even though all prisoners landed on the floor to dodge the bullets, there were 37 injured. Another case that shows the brutality and criminal behavior of the Castro regime against the political prisoners was the mutilation of Eduardo Capote, a former teacher who, while waiting in line to receive the meager food of ration just in front of me, protested in loud voice for the poor quality of the food, boiled macaroni without salt or any sauce. And a guard launched at him wielding a machete, a sword-like blade, and by a stroke cut off half of Capote's right hand. And when Capote covered his head to protect it, he received another stroke on his left hand that cut all his tendons, leaving his hand twisted forever. I have a copy of Capote's testimony and photograph when he, years later, served his 15 years sentence and came to Miami. Here is a photograph of the hands of Capote and his testimony to the press in Miami. I'm going to hand it to the commission. Finally, but not less important, I want to denounce the psychiatric abuses used as a tool of terror and torture against the political prisoners. By the way, a practice very usual in the former Soviet Union, where the Cuban regime trained their agents. My friend, Eugenio de Sosa Chabao, former director of a prestigious newspaper in Havana, and sent to prison for participating in a clandestine movement, was at Isla de Pino prison when a drunken guard of a prison boasted that they will destroy the United States. Eugenio challenged the guard to explain how they may do it, and the drunken guard revealed that he was one of the drivers of a huge trucks carrying the Soviet missiles received at the port of Mariel and taken to be installed in Pinar del Rio province. Eugenio perceived that it was true, and when he received his family visit, gave instruction to his sister to send the information to the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, who coincidentally had been his roommate at Choate Academy in Connecticut and had kept being friends afterward. By an unknown reason, some years later, the Cuban regime got information that Eugenio had been the source, given the hint about the nuclear missiles in Cuba, and was sent to a psychiatric hospital of Havana known as Mazorra, where he received 14 sessions of electroshocks, 4 sessions on the head and 10 on the testicles. I have a copy of Eugenio's words describing the tortures he received. These abuses were so frequent at Mazorra Hospital that there were 2 wards, Sala Castellanos and Sala Carbó Serviá, separated for the internment of political prisoners. And as an act of superior justice, an unexpected event took place in Miami in 2002, when Jose Maria Fernandez, another political prisoner who suffered psychiatric tortures, identified in Miami the military guy, Heriberto Mederos, who applied the electroshocks to political prisoners in Mazorra. The prisoner, Jose Maria Fernandez, received 27 electroshocks from Mederos because he had deserted from the armed forces of Cuba. Mederos was arrested and taken to court for crimes against humanity and for lying to the immigration office, hiding his crimes in Cuba. The trial began on July 22, 2002, but the punishment was delivered before the trial ended because Mederos died from a massive heart attack. Of course, the criminals who gave the orders for the psychiatric tortures are still at large in Cuba. You may be led to believe that those tortures are issues of the past, but they are not. As recently as last May the 1st of this year, 2017, Daniel Llorente, a Cuban dissident who ran to the head of a government rally at Plaza Cívica in Havana, while calling loudly, "Freedom for Cuba," was arrested and beaten in front of TV cameras, and later sent on to the psychiatric hospital of Mazorra, where he has been receiving continuous electroshocks. Trying to stop the tortures, Daniel Llorente initiated a hunger strike. His family has not been able to see him more. We have no more information or new information on the case. And with me, I have a long list of prisoners tortured by psychiatric abuses of electroshocks in Cuba. I already turned that list to the Commission. Thank you very much.
I'd like to welcome to this hall to our hostess, to our hosts, Congresswoman Elena Ros-Lehtinen.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mario. Thank you. You will excuse me. I'm usually loud and obnoxious. Now I'm just going to be obnoxious, but I have no voice. But Mario's going to be a wonderful orator, and I will just manage to get through this. Thank you, Mario, for being here. And he's the best speaker. And look at this audience. Wow. You know, you're all my friends, and I love you so much. Gracias, Orlando. We're going to spend Saturday night together. I can't wait. But thank you, Justice Cuba, distinguished members of the Commission of Crimes Against Humanity. I want to express my sincere appreciation to all of you for what the Commission is doing. Your work is vital in educating the public of the brutal realities of what has and continues to be occurring in Cuba each and every day. Ustedes lo saben. Nadie le va a decir a ustedes, muchos de ustedes que son expresos políticos, pero que siguen ahí en la lucha, lo que está ocurriendo en Cuba. Thank you, Directorio. Thank you, Freedom House, for your roles in today's important event as well. Most importantly, thank you to the brave men and women, these noble witnesses we will be hearing from today, and maybe you already have, who are here to share their stories of abuse, of repression that is still being committed in Castro's Cuba. We know that you have experienced the worst, but we also know that sadly, these experiences are not unique to you. They are all too common in Cuba. I'd also like to express my dismay that one of our honored guests, Antunes, was invited to be here with us today. He could not join us. Why? Because this regime is so insecure that allowing Antunes to come here to rail against the regime's abuses was too much for them. I like to hear the sound of babies. Don't remove that baby, that sounds good. And his call for a free Cuba was too much for them, so they prevented him from joining us here today. We have become all too familiar with these accounts. There's so many to list. The torture against political prisoners, the Brothers to the Rescue shoot down, the March 13th tugboat massacre, so many murders committed by the Castro regime, and the regime's responsibility in the human rights abuses occurring in Venezuela today. I've met with Laura Poyan, so has Mario, the founder of Las Damas de Blanco, the Ladies in White, and listened in shock as she recounted her harrowing experience of being beaten, of being harassed by the regime. And then she died under mysterious circumstances, and you could see her puncture wounds. Obviously, she had been poisoned by the regime. And we met with Osvaldo Payá and marveled at his passion to bring freedom and democracy to his Cuba, even in the face of inhumane retaliation by the Castros, and ultimately led to his untimely death, again in the hands of the regime. That was no accident, that was murder. And we continue to meet with his daughter, Rosa Maria, as she's taken up his mantle to call for a plebiscite in Cuba. We all have different ways to get to the same goal, and they're all worthy. And we are here, Mario and I, para decir que estamos comprometidos con ustedes para seguir esa lucha. Whether we have a voice or whether we don't, we will continue to battle. Mario and I have had the honor, the incredible privilege of meeting with so many victims of the Castro regime who've experienced far too frequently the heavy hand of that dictatorship. And here in Congress, we have the honor, the high privilege of representing thousands of Cuban American families here in Congress, so many who have bled and fought against the Castro regime. And every one of them has firsthand stories. Every one of them is a victim of Castro's tyranny. And we all know what would have happened if they had stayed behind. And we thank those who stayed behind because they are subject to the regime's torture tactics while in prison, the sonic torture that Luis and Ernesto suffered, of the beatings and torture that Basilio and Antunes repeatedly experienced. And while they were detained and while they were tortured, I know what we would have done if we had still been in Cuba. I know what all of us would have done. We would have joined with the Ladies in White, Las Damas de Blanco, and we would have also been subjected to harassment and to thuggery, because that is what the communist regime does. That is their playbook. That's the only thing they know how to do, to violently attack peaceful dissidents. And that's what we're here to hear from these speakers today. The fight for justice and the spirit for freedom lives on in each and every one of us. Whether we were born in Cuba, whether we were born elsewhere, wherever you are, that's what binds us together. And we're going to continue that fight. I have a longer speech, but my voice just won't allow me. Y solamente le quiero decir que para Mario, para mí, para Albio Cires, para Carlos Curbelo, para Marco Rubio, para Bob Menéndez, qué honor, qué placer, qué privilegio estar aquí para hablar en favor de los derechos humanos, en favor de la libertad, en favor. Mira quién tenemos aquí, ven acá, mi héroe. Dios mío, cuando nosotros tuvimos un expreso soviético judío, Natan Sharansky, que fue al fin liberado de la cárcel, tuvimos una tremenda reunión con todos los expresos políticos y Natán me dijo, yo no puedo pensar que yo he estado solamente una fracción de los años que ustedes han estado como presos en Cuba. Pero tú me has dicho, yo nunca estuve preso, yo siempre estuve libre.
Jamás.
¿Cuántos años, Néstor?
22 años.
22 años. Increíble.
Sí, pero-
¿Quién puede decir eso? Y hay tantos. Un aplauso. Pero que para Mario y para mí es un privilegio estar aquí con ustedes. Gracias a las víctimas, nuestros héroes, nuestros mártires, de los hermanos al rescate, que aquí tenemos 3 que vivieron esa tragedia. Gracias, Silvia. Gracias a ustedes. Qué honor más grande, el honor más grande de mi vida. Y estoy aquí y pienso y siempre pensando y orando por mis padres, que para ellos esto fue un sueño realizado, poder estar aquí en el Congreso denunciando ese régimen y decirle sí a los Pinos Nuevos. Ven acá, que tuve el privilegio de reunirme con él hace solamente, bueno, eso fue la semana pasada. Y si ustedes piensan que eso es, ese sueño de libertad es para los viejos, es para los Pinos Nuevos, como dijo nuestro apóstol, la nueva generación que sigue tan duro contra Castro, que ama tanto la libertad y los derechos humanos, que siguen sufriendo y sudando por ellos. Así que gracias por este privilegio, los quiero mucho, cariños.
Gracias por eso.
Thank you very much for your words. Now I'd like to introduce our host, Mario Díaz-Balart.
Thank you so much.
Please, Congressman.
Thank you. Buenos días. Muchas gracias to Freedom House, this committee, to the Directorio Orlando, to all the key organizers. Thank you. Thank you for this important moment in the cause of freedom. I would be remiss if I didn't start by mentioning that we just heard from a person who, while her voice today is weakened by a cold, her resolve and her voice and her courage and her spirit of freedom and fight has no parallel in the history of the halls of this Congress. Thank you, Ileana. So, and there's so many. Ileana just talked about, you know, we're among friends here, right? And this is such a special audience. Ustedes que tanto han hecho y han sacrificado and you know, she mentioned a number of individuals and groups that are here. El presidio político histórico, representado aquí por años de presidio, por, de nuevo, los plantados, por los mártires de Hermanos al Rescate, por los mártires del remolcador, for the hundreds of thousands of people that have died trying to reach freedom, for the family members that still yearn for the tortures and the disappeared and the murdered. It is truly a privilege to be able to be among, frankly, heroes of ours. A couple things that I wanted to point out. While we're going to listen to, and we're hearing from some individual folks who have stories of tragedy and of torture and of murder and of abuse, but also of that fighting spirit for freedom that never, never goes away. Unfortunately, there are some folks that cannot be here with us today. Ileana mentioned Antunes, who, as he says, is an individual who spent 17 years in prison, tortured, beaten, and yet has never been confused, has never lost the fight for freedom. And he's not here, obviously, because that regime, because of they're scared of him, and people like him won't let him out. But there are others that are not going to be able to speak either. People like Orlando Zapata Tamayo, like Juan Wilfredo Soto García, como Osvaldo Payá, como Gerald Cepero, como Laura Pavoyan. So many martyrs who gave their lives for the simple cause, the desire that Cubans could live in freedom. And that cause continues to this day. And so, as Ileana said, what a privilege for us to be able to know so many of you. What a privilege to be able to be a voice, a small voice, here in Congress for the cause of freedom for the Cuban people. But by the way, the cause of freedom for the Cuban people, for those in Venezuela, for those in North Korea, for those in wherever tyranny exists. There you will always have the voice of Ileana Rosletinen. There you will always have the voices of the members of Congress who, through your experiences, have seen the horrors of what it is to live in oppression and lack of freedom. So it is truly a privilege, a deep honor, to be able to be here with you today. It is just know that like you have never given up, we will never give up. Ileana just mentioned a young Cuban student who was thrown out of the university just because he, again, longs for freedom. So that cause is alive and well. And by the way, I also need to end with another note. I am exceedingly grateful that the policy of the last number of years of trying to legitimize the corrupt, murderous regime in Cuba, of the visual of having the President of the United States doing the wave in a baseball game with a tyrant, those days are over. And we are grateful for that new attitude of not trying to legitimize the regime. No. To recognizing the legitimacy of those who have it, which are the Cuban people, the civil society, the opposition folks, los presos políticos, los mártires. So, again, it is truly a privilege and an honor. And one thing that I learned a long time ago is that even with an Ileana Rosletinen, whose voice has left her because of a cold, you never want to follow her up and try to outspeak her, because it does not work. So, Ileana, thank you for your leadership. Thank you, heroes, for your leadership. Es un privilegio poder estar aquí como una pequeña voz en esta causa de la libertad que ustedes han hecho y siguen haciendo tanto para lograr lo que es inevitable, que es el día de la libertad absoluta y plena de todos los cubanos. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you.
You're going to present us with something.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right now, please, we want to welcome General Antonio Rivero. He's former officers of the Venezuelan Armed Forces. And for the first time in these hearings, we are going to hear a testimony of the influence of the Castro regime in other countries. It's Venezuela. And please, General, would you please deliver the documents to the Congress?
Thank you. I'm so sorry, I don't want to get you sick.
Estos documentos
Gracias.
nos remitidos son
Let's take a photo
los
here.
primeros acuerdos secretos firmados. Estos documentos son los primeros acuerdos confidenciales firmados entre la Fuerza Armada de Cuba y la Fuerza Armada de Venezuela, que yo tuve la oportunidad de contraponer desde el año 2008, motivo por el cual se me abrió juicio militar y comenzó mi persecución desde Venezuela, tanto por el régimen venezolano de Chávez en el momento, como por el régimen cubano, quien ha ordenado mi búsqueda igualmente internacional, de manera internacional. Entonces dejo esto a ustedes, por primera vez lo hago entrega a autoridades y yo sigo haciendo el esfuerzo por el resto y la continuidad del combate de esto en apoyo a lo que vienen ustedes haciendo.
Gracias.
Estamos a la orden.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias. Gracias.
Muy agradecido.
Gracias.
Bueno, despidamos con un fuerte aplauso.
Nos vemos el sábado. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Sorry, my English is very so-so. I speak in Spanish.
Dame una pausa de vez en cuando.
Sí, sí.
¿Es
Esto es lo que voy a leer.
presentación?
No, esto. Voy a hacer una lectura
Ok.
de esto, pero a la vez voy a estar
Ok.
presentando parte de la mina.
Dame una pausa para poder traducirlo y...
Ok, tomar simplemente,
Exacto.
básicamente. Bueno, damas y caballeros, apreciados amigos, quiero agradecer la oportunidad que me han dado el poder de contribuir con la suma de voluntades y esfuerzos en su lucha contra la violación de los derechos humanos y en particular contra la ignominia destructiva de la ideologización castrocomunista en los países de América Latina.
I want to thank you for the opportunity given to me to be able to contribute to the efforts to struggle against the violation of human rights and in particular against the ignominious destructive ideologization of Castro communism in the countries of Latin America.
Particularmente el caso de Venezuela, que voy a tratar acá, tiene que ver o está muy vinculado, por supuesto, a la situación o a lo que impera propiamente en Cuba, derivado propiamente en razón de que es un proyecto situado y originario del castrocomunismo por parte de Hugo Chávez.
I want to say that I'm going to focus on the case of Venezuela, but I think it's important to recognize that it is linked to the Castro Communist Project based in Cuba that was applied by Hugo Chavez.
Inicialmente, gracias. Después de la Segunda Guerra Mundial, Venezuela se convirtió por su riqueza petrolera en una visión estratégica para la Unión Soviética, cuyo inmediato expansionismo del comunismo en América buscó cómo ubicarse en uno de los países que pudiera dominar a los Estados Unidos. Es allí que se planteó dicha estrategia de lucha en los años de la Guerra Fría para dominar a Venezuela.
After the Second World War, Venezuela, due to its richness as an oil-producing power, became a target, an objective of the Soviet Union for its expansion of communism in Latin America, and to seek to dominate the United States through this major supplier of oil.
Después de terminar la dictadura del general Marcos Pérez Jiménez en Venezuela en el año 1958 y surgir como un accidente político en la historia el guerrillero y asesino Fidel Castro, que logra triunfar en una mal llamada revolución en Cuba, fue a Venezuela con el fin de cumplir una misión soviética y obtener el beneficio de Venezuela.
After the end of the dictatorship of the General Marcos Pérez Jiménez in Venezuela in 1958, and due to a political accident, the guerrilla fighter Fidel Castro, achieving his triumph of the poorly named Cuban Revolution, went to Venezuela with the aim of his alliance with the Soviet Union to advance their agenda in that country.
Al no encontrar ese apoyo del gobierno, recién gobierno democrático instaurado en Venezuela, pues se dedicó a instaurar y a imponer la lucha armada a través de la guerrilla que duró durante los años 60 y 70 en Venezuela.
Not finding a receptive audience with the newly democratic government of Venezuela, he sought to install a different government using armed struggle throughout the 1960s and 70s.
Fidel Castro fue a Venezuela a cumplir una misión soviética, conquistarla para el comunismo y para librar dominio sobre los Estados Unidos. Y sobre esa base, la lucha armada como él la logró en Cuba.
Fidel Castro went to Venezuela with one objective, and that was to conquer that country for communism and to do it through an armed struggle.
No fue sino a través de ese proceso y de posterior a varios eventos guerrilleros entre los años 60 y 70, desde 1962, 65, 68, 66, donde esa lucha armada produjo muertos en el ámbito del punto de vista de la población, militares y civiles, en combates cruentos que llevó a cabo incluso a través de varias invasiones hacia Venezuela.
In 1962, 1965, 66, 67, 68, 69, 71, there were numerous armed conflicts in Venezuela where both military and civilians died because of this armed struggle put forward by the Cubans.
Al no encontrar victoria armada sobre Venezuela y romper con el gobierno democrático, se impuso otra vía desde Cuba, la vía del Congreso y la vía militar al infiltrar en la Fuerza Armada a través de la Academia Militar jóvenes que fueron catetizados mediante la ideologización en las escuelas.
Not finding victory through the armed struggle, they went through other means, targeting, infiltrating the Congress and infiltrating the military through the military academies.
Es así que en 1971 ingresa a la Academia Militar de Venezuela el entonces joven Hugo Chávez Frías, quien ya venía junto a otros jóvenes con una formación ideológica y formarían parte de un programa educativo de formación militar necesaria para tomar el poder a futuro.
And in 1971, Hugo Chávez Frías, already ideologically formed, goes into the military academy with others.
Decía un famoso guerrillero venezolano de nombre Clever Ramírez, que en 1971, que dentro de 20 años tomaríamos el poder y haríamos lugar la revolución en Venezuela.
In the early 70s, they were looking to form cadres within the armed forces, and Chavez, Kleber, Ramirez called it already the Bolivarian Revolution. And they said that within 20 years, they would be taking power and would bring the revolution to Venezuela.
Fue así como 20 años después que estos jóvenes se hicieron oficiales, hubo la intentona golpista del año 92, el 4 de febrero, golpe fracasado junto con el del 27 de noviembre.
20 years later, November 27, 1992, a coup d'etat is carried out by these military elements against the democracy, but it fails.
Liberado Hugo Chávez en 1994 y posteriormente en un proceso político asume la presidencia vía democrática en el año 98. Se cumple así la asunción del poder de este infiltrado en la Fuerza Armada Nacional.
In 1994, Hugo Chavez is released, and in 1998, through a political process, he assumes power, this person who had infiltrated the armed forces decades earlier.
Esta asunción al poder se enmascaró con una falsa democracia y un falso no creer, tal cual como su mentor principal, Fidel Castro en que no iba a haber comunismo ni socialismo.
And he got into power through a false democratic message, like Fidel Castro saying that there wouldn't be communism or socialism.
La inteligencia del castrismo llega propiamente a servir a Hugo Chávez en el año 97, dicho por propios cubanos que tuve la oportunidad de conocer y ayudar a salir del país en el año 2010. Estos primeros cubanos tendrían la misión de inteligencia y seguridad, asesoramiento de la campaña electoral, informática, política y captación de recursos.
Cuban and Castro's intelligence services begins to serve Hugo Chavez in 1997. And I learned this from the very Cubans that I had the opportunity to meet and help flee the country in 2010. These first Cubans had the mission, the intelligence mission and the security mission to provide advice to his campaign, information, and also for resources and policy.
Posterior a la victoria de Hugo Chávez, comienza un proceso de entradas discretas, aún en el primer año de gobierno, pero posterior al evento natural que causó un desastre nacional en Venezuela con miles de víctimas, comenzó una oleada de cubanos que convenían entre Fidel y Chávez para la atención y recuperación de desastres.
Following the victory, there begins a process of discrete entries, even in the first year. But after the natural event that caused a national disaster with thousands of victims in December of 1999, began the wave of Cubans between Fidel and between Fidel and Chavez as a base of attention and recuperation from the disaster.
Allí comenzaba a establecerse la visión totalitaria de este régimen en el cual Hugo Chávez recibía constante adoctrinamiento o información o instrucciones desde Fidel Castro.
And that's where the totalitarian nature of the regime began and where Hugo Chavez was receiving constant ideological principles and concepts from Fidel Castro.
Surgen las denominadas misiones sociales a nivel de salud y educación, ya posterior al desastre mencionado, consolidando el triunfo de Chávez a finales del año 2000.
And that's where began the so-called social missions, in focus on areas of health and education, following the disaster and consolidating the victory of Chavez at the end of 2000.
Para el año 2010, durante 10 años, permanecen de manera permanente aproximadamente 92.700 cubanos cumpliendo diferentes misiones sociales, políticas y deportivas dentro del orden nacional.
By the year 2010, there was a permanent presence of approximately 92,700 Cubans in all areas and sectors of the government.
De estos 92.700 cubanos, se estima que solamente en el área de inteligencia y seguridad estaban presentes unos 3.000 especialistas que tenían la habilidad de informática, de control, de seguimiento de personas, tanto venezolanos como cubanos. A continuación, vamos a ver cómo opera esta inteligencia castrista en Venezuela y cómo sostiene el dominio sobre lo que actualmente es el régimen y combatiendo la lucha que opositoramente se ha sostenido durante años contra este régimen nefasto. El G2 cubano opera de la siguiente manera en Venezuela.
Of the 92,700 Cubans, there's estimated that 3,000 of them are specialists in intelligence, covering all areas, being able to get into computers, to monitor and follow not only Venezuelans, but also Cubans in Venezuela. And now we're going to look at the Cuban G2 in Venezuela.
4 grandes áreas de inteligencia se manejan desde el G2 cubano en Venezuela. El área de inteligencia sobre su propio personal, es decir, esos 92.000 personas que existen allá, una primera área. Es decir, ejercen la función misma que en Cuba policial, de seguimiento, etcétera, etcétera, incluso de devolución a Cuba en caso de fallar los cubanos que están allí.
The first pillar of the intelligence apparatus is to spy on the 92,000 Cubans and to follow them, and of course, if they misbehave, return them to Cuba.
Una segunda área es la inteligencia sobre la base institucional que cumple funciones los cubanos presentes en Venezuela. Es decir, por ejemplo, sobre los cubanos que cumplen o que están haciendo funciones en el Ministerio del Ambiente o en el sector del ambiente, así en salud, así en educación, así en energía y petróleo.
The second area is at the institutional base. The Cubans are involved in the sectors of the environment, health, and other areas.
Otra área es la inteligencia sobre la base militar y civil de seguridad para el sostenimiento del poder político que rige para el momento con el proyecto.
The other area is for the intelligence apparatus to monitor the military and civilian sectors to maintain power.
Y la cuarta área es la inteligencia política sobre la base de los partidos opositores, los propios partidos del régimen, la dirigencia opositora y la base popular, donde obtiene gran parte de la información para poder persuadir del proyecto castrocomunista que debe imponerse.
And the last pillar is that of the institutional, of the political intelligence, which seeks to penetrate the opposition political parties, opposition leadership, the government party, to persuade the need to install the Castro communist model in the country.
La organización de esta estructura de inteligencia en Venezuela se puede apreciar de la siguiente manera. Es más ampliada, más detallada, de manera general. Hay una coordinación general a nivel de país, de Venezuela, regida directamente desde Cuba.
First and foremost, there's a national reach and there's a general coordinator of Venezuela.
Hay un nivel ministerial de altos ejecutivos, de directivos, que también se inscriben dentro de la estructura y que obtienen información necesaria para procesar hacia el régimen en La Habana o hacia el régimen propiamente venezolano.
There's also a penetration at the ministerial level where information is provided to the national regime in Venezuela, but also in Havana.
Y hay un nivel directivo, ya medio, bajo, que permite obtener la información necesaria en áreas que ocupan directamente con cargo el personal de inteligencia. Tal es el caso, por ejemplo, de algunos directores en estos momentos de registros y notarías de identificación e inmigración que les suministran la información necesaria contraria al proyecto que pueda estarse dando o de la gestión que lleva a cabo el modelo que están presentando.
And then there are the lower directors, it's lower level directors that occupy specific areas such as registering IDs, immigration, that have access to documents of identification.
Los 3.000 especialistas de inteligencia que mencioné anteriormente se distribuyen en las áreas que le dije anteriormente y ocupan de otra manera para poder observar estos tres niveles piramidales: el alto nivel político, los niveles medios, directivo y ejecutivo, y el nivel poblacional de aplicación de políticas.
So the 3,000 intelligence specialists I mentioned earlier are divided up into this pyramid. Those that deal with high politics, those at the middle level with the executives, please back a bit, and finally also reaching into the population itself and applying the policies there.
Las áreas o instituciones de desenvolvimiento y operación del ejército cubano de manera directa, represiva, que actúa y que está presente permanentemente, son estas cuatro grandes áreas, y donde incluso hay la inducción desde el punto de vista hacia funcionarios policiales y militares para operar en contra de los opositores.
And these are the four main areas that the Cuban Intelligence Service uses to target the opposition in Venezuela.
El área militar que contiene el Ministerio de la Defensa, el ministro, quien tiene un asesor general permanente allí y que es prácticamente quien rinde cuenta directa a Andoyo Valdés, el general encargado del área militar desde Cuba. Andoyo Valdés.
Andoyo Valdés. So Andoyo Valdés is the assistant to the defense minister who is providing the reports to Cuba on a constant basis.
Está el Comando Estratégico Operacional, que es la unidad cerebro operativa de toda la Fuerza Armada. Allí están presentes por cada área estratégica un representante de la Fuerza Militar cubana que recibe información y entrega asesoría a que deba cumplirse.
The Strategic Command has, under each area, one representative of the Cuban Armed Forces.
Esa es la base del cumplimiento de los acuerdos que acabo de entregar a la congresista Ileana y al congresista Mario Díaz.
And that's what I just described as the base of the agreements that I just handed over to Congresswoman Ileana Ross-Leighton and Congressman Mario Díaz-Balart.
Los otros sectores de procesamiento y operación de inteligencia están directamente relacionados con el Ministerio de Interior y Justicia, la propia Presidencia de la República y organizaciones sociales ejecutivas de esta presidencia.
So other sectors are the presidency, social sectors, sectors of government.
Las funciones que cumple el G2 cubano se pueden simplificar o reducir de la siguiente manera. Obtención de información estratégica inicial y existente para su transformación política e ideológica.
Obtaining strategic information, both initial and existing, for the transformation of politics and ideology.
Detección e identificación de grupos políticos, organizaciones no gubernamentales o empresas de corte opositor al proyecto comunista.
Detection and identification of political groups, non-governmental organizations, or businesses that have opposition tendencies to the project.
Entre otras, por leer, aplicación del proceso de inteligencia en todas direcciones y niveles para la permanente actualización de la situación de país.
Okay. The application of the process of intelligence in all directors and all levels for the permanent actualization of the situation of the country.
Estas siguen siendo las funciones de inteligencia del G2 cubano en Venezuela. Realmente esto es muy largo y difícil de exponer, pero quiero dejar muestra clara de cómo lo que ustedes están viviendo, lo que ustedes vivieron, hoy en día se busca imponer en Venezuela a través de esta fuerza militar, esta fuerza política y esta ocupación nacional que tiene actualmente el régimen castrista en Venezuela.
These are the functions of the Cuban Intelligence Service in Venezuela. It's very complex, very detailed, and very difficult to present in such short order, but this is what's operating today in Venezuela.
Adelante. Como conclusión, para concluir, busca la conclusión y propuesta.
To conclude,
la propuesta. Okay. La conclusión. Okay. Venezuela está en una crisis generalizada debido a la situación impuesta por un modelo o por un proyecto comunista, segregacionista, exclusionista y criminal, revestido de delitos a niveles de la mafia, del narcotráfico, del terrorismo y, por supuesto, de la corrupción que hoy impera en Venezuela.
Venezuela is in a generalized crisis, product of trying to impose a communist system, product of mafias, narcotics dealers, and massive corruption.
Mi propuesta final tiene que ver, por supuesto, en un término militar. Y la primera propuesta en la cual trabajamos para ello está reflejada en el primer punto. La expulsión inmediata de fuerzas antagónicas extranjeras que hoy ocupan nuestro suelo. Desde Venezuela y pisando nuestro territorio, queremos decirle o quiero decirle a ustedes, compatriotas de muchos que están allá en Venezuela y que quizás no tienen la culpa, la responsabilidad de esa ocupación, que sí militarmente la pueden tener y estamos en el pleno derecho de declararle la guerra militar en nuestro suelo a esos cubanos. Muchas gracias.
Very quickly. He was saying that his main proposal is for the expulsion of the presence of the foreign troops, the Cuban troops in Venezuela, and by any means possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, General. Now, we're going to receive, we're call here, another testimony of a political prisoner that has been tortured in the Castrist prisons. Please welcome Basilio Guzmán.
Buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Gracias, Justicia Cuba.
Thank you, Justice Cuba.
Lo mío va a ser breve,
What I have to say will be brief,
porque lo más interesante para mí es que sepan cómo ellos aplican las torturas en las prisiones.
what's most interesting for me to explain is how they apply torture in the prisons.
Septiembre 29 del 69,
September 29, 1969,
fui a una huelga de hambre en la cabaña.
I was on a hunger strike in Cabaña.
Nos aplicaron bocinas que emitían ruido frente a las galeras.
They applied loudspeakers that emitted noises in our prison gallery.
Como que no teníamos protección para que esos ruidos no entraran, no podíamos hacer nada para protegernos.
We had no protection to avoid those sounds entering. There was nothing for us to protect ourselves with.
Nos dañaron los oídos,
It caused harm to our ears.
producían mareos, dolores de cabeza,
It made us dizzy. It caused headaches,
problemas nerviosos.
caused nervous problems.
Esto duró desde que empezó la huelga hasta que se terminó, que duraron 36 días.
This lasted from the start of the hunger strike until the end, which was 36 days.
Esto terminó la huelga e inmediatamente nos trasladaron a la prisión de Boniato.
At the end of the hunger strike, they immediately transferred us to the prison of Boniato.
En Boniato escuchábamos amarrado a una mata de mango los fusilamientos de jóvenes orientales.
In Boniato, tied to a mango tree, we heard the executions of young people from the east.
Supimos mucho antes de esto que aplicaron gavetas en 3 macíos donde pusieron muchos prisioneros, compañeros de nosotros.
We knew long before this that they practiced placing friends of ours, other prisoners, into cabinets.
De esos prisioneros, muchos salieron con problemas de invalidez y problema mental, ya que de esas gavetas no salían por largo tiempo, tenían que hacer todas sus necesidades ahí adentro.
And we know that those who emerged from those cabinets came out with physical problems and psychological problems because they were in those cabinets for long periods of time and had to do their necessities in those cabinets.
En una ocasión que me llevaron a Santiago de Cuba, Seguridad del Estado, entré en una celda donde yo podía agarrar los mosquitos con la mano, ya que ellos tienen criadero alrededor de las celdas para forma de castigo.
I was taken by state security to Santiago de Cuba to a cell where there were so many mosquitoes I could grab them with my hand because they had breeding ponds around the cells of mosquitoes.
En el año 84 pedíamos agua, ya hacía días que no nos daban agua, pedíamos agua, ellos nos grabaron la voz de nosotros, la grabaron, la pusieron en bocinas de alto voltaje, como que estábamos cerrados en tapiadas, con puertas de hierro, en pequeñas tapiadas, había un pasillo por el centro de las celdas, colocaron todas esas bocinas ahí adentro y pusieron el ruido nuevamente que se triplicó al que sentíamos en la cabaña.
In 1984, we were begging for water for days, and they recorded our voices, and then they took these large speakers, and we were in punishment cells with covered plates, which made the sound even greater. In fact, triplicated the sound, and then started playing those recordings at a very high volume.
Actualmente yo sufro de mareo, dolores de cabeza, no tengo equilibrio para caminar, muchas veces me voy de lado como si estuviera borracho. Tengo pesadillas, me despierto a medianoche porque tengo al militar delante de mí dándome bayoneta, tengo el militar dándome golpe. Esto fue en Isla Pino constantemente. En la masacre de Boniato me rompieron la cabeza con una cabilla corrugada de 2 pies de largo. Hubimos 58 heridos, la mayoría de gravedad.
I actually suffer from dizziness, headaches. I have a problem with equilibrium. I can fall over. I have nightmares. At midnight, in the middle of the night, I'll wake up and see the military, the individual, the soldier who would beat me and pick at me. And Isla de Pino was something constant. I also recall being hit in the head with a 2-foot-long piece of corrugated pipe.
Ellos han aplicado todo tipo de tortura. Los castigos existen desde que entra en la prisión porque todo es castigo. Desde los alimentos hasta de la forma de dormir, que no tiene nada. La mayoría de las veces yo tuve que dormir sobre el cemento. La huelga de hambre tuve muchas. Pero siempre adelante, desafiándolos. Nunca retrocedimos. Y aquí estamos para seguir contando la historia las veces que sea necesaria. Gracias.
Espera, que tengo que terminar la última parte de lo que dijiste. So, arriving at that prison, everything was punishment. From the nutrition to the time to go to sleep. Many times I had to sleep on cement. There were many hunger strikes, but we never backed down. We always raised our voice. We always defied them.
Well, we made it. We have reached the end of the testimonies, the physical testimonies of the victims and witnesses of the crimes against humanity. I want to thank very much and in a very special way to Directorio Democrático Cubano. Without them, this would be impossible to be done. And I want to thank all of you, all the witnesses, all the victims, all of you that are here to hear what we have to know, what we commission have to know, all the data we have gathered, all the evidences have been delivered to us. I want you to know in these public hearings what you hear. We are processing, we are having all these files ready to be delivered to a tribunal that may judge in a trial, in a legal trial, all these criminals. Thank you very much for being here. It's been an honor to be the chair of this commission. Thank you to the members of the commission. Thank you to all of you for being here. Have a nice way back home.